The quiet inside the cathedral felt unnatural, like the air itself was holding its breath. Rows of polished wooden pews stretched beneath towering arches, stained glass filtering pale winter light onto faces dressed in black. This wasn't just a funeral, it was a summit. Executives, board members, industry giants, all gathered to pay respects to my father, the man who built a logistics empire from rusted trucks and borrowed fuel money. But grief wasn't the loudest emotion in the room. Ambition was. I stood near the front, hands folded, spine straight, eyes fixed on the casket. My father's name was engraved in gold on a brass plate, heavy and permanent. Behind me, whispers moved like insects, quiet, busy, impatient. Then Samantha stepped forward. She didn't wait for the priest to finish. She didn't glance at the coffin. She reached for the microphone with manic confidence, her heels clicking sharply against marble, and turned to face the audience like this was a product launch. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice polished and rehearsed. "My husband Zachary and I appreciate your support during this transition." Transition, she smiled, scanning the room, waiting for admiration. Effective immediately, Zachary will assume the role of CEO, continuing my father-in-law's legacy into a bold new era. She paused, expecting applause. None came. What did come was a sound that didn't belong. A low, unmistakable chuckle rolled through the cathedral speakers, dry, deliberate, and deeply familiar. Every head snapped toward the casket. Zachary's face drained of color. That laugh didn't come from the dead. It came from preparation. But no one knew that yet. To understand how we arrived at this moment, you have to rewind 10 minutes, before the microphone, before the laugh, before the illusion shattered. Zachary and Samantha weren't grieving. They were campaigning. While mourners dabbed their eyes, Zachary worked the aisle, shaking hands, accepting condolences like congratulations. Samantha leaned close to board members, whispering about modernization and brand elevation, as if the cathedral were already their office. From the front pew, I watched quietly. Zachary eventually leaned toward me, straightening a tie that cost more than my monthly rent. "Don't worry," he muttered, barely moving his lips. "We'll find something for you. Someone needs to handle documentation while leadership focuses on vision." Leadership. It was his favorite word. He said it like a crown he'd already placed on his head. I didn't respond. I didn't react. I didn't even blink. I just looked past him to Peter. Peter had been my father's right hand for 4 decades. He knew every driver by name, every route by memory. He stood near the aisle, his posture rigid, grief etched into his face. In his hand was a small black remote. Our eyes met. I gave him a single nod. That was all it took. Peter turned and walked toward the cathedral doors. The heavy oak closed with a dull thud. Then came the sound that mattered most. Click. The doors were locked. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but before anyone could question it, Peter raised the remote and pointed it toward the massive screen behind the altar. It flickered. The room darkened. And my father appeared. Not smiling, not sentimental. He sat at his desk, shoulders squared, eyes sharp, staring directly into the camera like he was about to dismantle someone's career. That same laugh echoed again, louder this time, freezing Samantha mid-breath. The ceremony had ended. The reckoning had begun. As the crowd stared at the screen, my mind drifted far from the cathedral to where this company actually lived. Not in corner offices or champagne fundraisers, but in frozen rail yards before dawn. In distribution centers that smelled like diesel and steel. While Zachary collected contacts at luxury conferences, I stood ankle-deep in slush negotiating with union leaders to prevent strikes. When he flew business class to network, I slept in server rooms fixing systems before clients noticed failures. For 10 years, I was invisible by design. I missed weddings, birthdays, holidays. I canceled plans because shipments were stuck overseas, because a cyber attack crippled tracking, because drivers needed answers at 3 a.m. I told myself competence would be rewarded. I believed merit mattered more than birth order. So I stayed quiet. I fixed problems before they surfaced. I audited fuel expenses, rerouted inefficient corridors, and cut millions in operational waste. I didn't ask for recognition. I told myself silence was professionalism. But silence isn't neutrality. It's permission. By saying nothing, I allowed them to erase me. They didn't see my work as contribution. They saw it as expectation. Infrastructure doesn't get thanked. It just gets used. They mistook my restraint for weakness. They didn't realize I was paying attention. Every stolen idea, every deal Zachary took credit for, every decision that put optics over stability. I logged it all, not in anger, but in patience. And my father had been watching too. 3 days earlier, 4 hours after my father died, Zachary and Samantha didn't go home. They went straight to headquarters. I was already there with Peter, managing calls, stabilizing partners, preventing panic. Grief didn't pause responsibility. The elevator doors opened. Zachary walked in, smiling. He ignored the black-draped furniture, the tension in the air. He ran his hand across my father's desk and scoffed. "This has to go, too old-fashioned." Samantha was already on her phone. "We'll need to renovate this entire floor. It smells like oil and history." Peter tried to intervene, voice trembling. He spoke about pensions, about drivers, about stability. Zachary laughed. "Relax, you won't be here much longer anyway." Then he turned to me, snatched the papers from my hands, and dropped them onto the floor. "You can stay," he said casually. "Handle admin. You're good at boring things." I bent down and picked up the papers. I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I met Peter's eyes and saw resolve ignite. That was the moment the plan became inevitable. Back in the cathedral, my father leaned forward on the screen, his voice filling the vast space. "Zachary," he said calmly, "you've been waiting for this day." Zachary froze. The room leaned in. The image of my father on the screen didn't waver. He didn't blink. He didn't soften his tone for the setting or the audience. This wasn't a farewell message. It was a deposition. "You always believed I was indulgent," he continued, his voice steady and unhurried. "That every check I signed was an endorsement of your judgment. You mistook access for approval." The camera angle shifted slightly, then the screen changed. Rows of data replaced his face. A massive financial ledger filled the display, numbers sharp enough to cut. Columns stretched downward, highlighted in red, each line item labeled with clinical precision. "Let's review the performance," my father said. The first entry appeared. "A nightlife venture in Miami. You described it as a cultural expansion. Cost, $2.4 million. Operational lifespan, 6 months." A murmur rippled through the pews. The next line slid into place. "A specialty automotive restoration project. Cost, $1.8 million. Outcome, liquidation." Samantha stopped breathing. I could see it. Her posture stiffening, her eyes glued to the screen, her hands slowly curling into fists. This wasn't the narrative she'd prepared for. This wasn't the version she'd sold. Item after item appeared. Consultants, branding agencies, failed investments disguised as innovation. With each request, my father continued, you promised growth. Each time you delivered erosion. Zachary's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked around the cathedral like someone searching for an exit that no longer existed. "I was warned," my father said. "People told me I was enabling you, that I was destroying you by protecting you from consequences." The ledger disappeared. My father's face returned closer now, sharper. "They were wrong," he said calmly. "I wasn't protecting you, I was measuring you." The room fell into absolute stillness. "I gave you resources to see what you would build. I wanted to know whether you could create value, or whether you would simply consume it." The answer hung in the air, unspoken, devastating. "You failed." The word landed with more weight than any accusation. Behind me, someone shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke. No one dared interrupt. "You didn't just waste money," my father continued. "You wasted opportunity. You mistook movement for progress and attention for leadership." The screen changed again. This time it wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a legal document. Clear, formal, signed. Zachary leaned forward in his seat, squinting. Recognition spread across his face like a slow-moving storm. "Every transfer you received," my father said, "was governed by an agreement, not a gift, not an inheritance advance." A clause was highlighted. In bold, "In the event that total liabilities exceed the designated threshold, voting rights and equity claims shall be immediately forfeited." Zachary's hands began to shake. "You never read them," my father continued. "You were always in a hurry, always celebrating." The cathedral felt smaller, tighter, like the walls were closing in. 5 years ago, my father said, you needed emergency funding. You were reckless, you were desperate, and you signed. The camera zoomed in on Zachary's unmistakable signature. He stared at it like it belonged to someone else. "Last month," my father continued, Your cumulative debt crossed the limit. A pause. $6,200,000. Gasps escaped before anyone could stop them. By contract, my father said, you forfeited your claim to this company. Samantha turned sharply toward Zachary, her expression shifting from confusion to calculation. Her eyes searched his face, demanding answers he couldn't give. But here's where the story diverges, my father said. The screen shifted one final time. A bank transfer receipt appeared. The amount filled the screen. $6,200,000. The sender's name was unmistakable. Mine. A collective inhale swept the room. Zachary turned slowly toward me, disbelief etched into every feature. Someone intervened, my father said. Someone who didn't seek recognition. Someone who absorbed pressure quietly. Someone who treated this company as responsibility, not entitlement. The screen faded back to my father's face. This time his expression changed. It softened. You didn't lose the company, Zachary, he said. You sold it. Zachary's shoulders collapsed. You sold it mistake by mistake, my father continued, and your sister bought it. Samantha staggered back as if struck. She owns your shares. She holds your vote. And she controls your future. The room was silent, but the chaos was internal. You could see it. Alliances shattering, calculations recalibrating. My father leaned back. Jessica, he said gently, the safe contains everything you need. He paused. Terminate his employment. The screen went black. The projector shut down. Light slowly returned to the cathedral, revealing faces stunned into stillness. Zachary stumbled out of the pew and rushed toward me, panic replacing arrogance. This isn't real, he whispered. You can't do this. We're family. I stepped back. This is business, I replied calmly. I handed him the envelope. Effective immediately, I continued. Your role is concluded. Your access has been revoked. His hands hovered over the envelope but didn't take it. And there's still a balance, I added. $200,000. The repayment schedule is inside. He looked past me, searching for support. There was none. Samantha didn't move toward him. She moved away. You told me it was secure, she hissed. You told me this was ours. She stepped back, disgust written plainly across her face. At that moment, I understood something important. Their power had never been real. It had been borrowed. And the loan had just been called in. Zachary stood frozen in the center aisle, the envelope still unopened in his shaking hand. Around him, the cathedral slowly returned to motion. Executives whispered to one another. Board members checked their phones, already recalibrating schedules and priorities. Grief gave way to logistics. Power always reorganizes itself quickly. Samantha was the first to move. She didn't touch Zachary. She didn't lower her voice. Her heels struck the marble as she stepped back, her expression stripped of affection, admiration, and pretense. You told me this was settled, she said sharply. You said the money was yours. Zachary tried to speak, but panic clogged his throat. He looked like someone waking up in a collapsing building, unsure which way was out. You promised me a future, Samantha continued, her words cutting cleanly. You promised me influence. She laughed once, bitter and hollow. You married me into debt. With that, she turned away from him, decisive, efficient, already planning her exit. In that single moment, the illusion shattered completely. She hadn't loved a man. She had invested in a title, and the title was gone. Zachary finally looked at me again. His eyes searched my face for hesitation, for guilt, for mercy. He found none. You can't do this, he said quietly. You know I wasn't built for this kind of pressure. Dad always handled the details. That's the difference, I replied. You expected the system to carry you. I became the system. He flinched. You don't understand what this does to me, he pleaded. I have nothing without this company. I studied him for a long moment. For years, his confidence had filled every room. Now, stripped of access, stripped of protection, he looked smaller than I remembered, like someone who had confused entitlement for identity. You had everything, I said evenly. You just never valued it. Peter approached quietly from behind me. It's done, he said. Your credentials are revoked, accounts frozen, legal has been notified. Zachary closed his eyes. That was it. No shouting, no dramatic removal, just the clean execution of consequence. The board members began filing out, already discussing shipping routes, contracts, and contingency plans. The company didn't pause. It never had. It didn't need theatrics. It needed stewardship. Zachary was no longer part of that equation. I turned and walked toward the exit without looking back. Outside, winter sunlight poured across the stone steps. The air felt sharper, clearer, like the pressure inside my chest had finally released. Peter held the car door open. For 20 years, he had done that for my father. Today, he did it for me. As we drove away, we passed the primary distribution hub. Trucks lined the bays in disciplined rows, engines humming, drivers moving with practiced efficiency. I watched them through the window, not with the familiar weight of obligation, but with calm assurance. For the first time, the responsibility felt balanced, not inherited, earned. My phone vibrated on the seat beside me. A notification. Samantha had filed for divorce. I dismissed it without comment. Then another vibration. Zachary calling. I blocked the number. It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. You don't negotiate with resolved outcomes. That evening, I returned to the office alone. The building was quiet, lights dimmed, the hum of servers steady and reassuring. I unlocked the safe in my father's office. Inside were documents, keys, and a single handwritten note. You already know what to do. I sat at his desk, not to change it, not to replace it, but to continue the work. I reviewed reports, approved routes, addressed concerns that had been waiting for real leadership. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt aligned. Zachary had chased the appearance of power. Samantha had chased proximity to it. Neither understood its cost. Power isn't loud. It's consistent. It shows up when no one is watching. It absorbs pressure. It protects what matters. That night, I slept without interruption. No emergency calls, no anxiety, no waiting for someone else's mistake to clean up. The next morning, the company opened on time. Drivers clocked in, shipments moved, contracts held. Nothing collapsed. Everything stabilized. Weeks later, Zachary tried once more, through attorneys, through intermediaries, through apologies rehearsed too late. The answer remained the same. The ledger was closed. Some people believe leadership is passed down like an heirloom. They're wrong. Leadership is purchased through sacrifice, restraint, and accountability. I didn't take the company from my brother. He spent it. I simply paid the balance. If you believe authority should be earned and not assumed, you already understand how this story ends. The empire didn't fall. It finally stood on the right foundation.